Welcome everybody. Welcome to the joint meeting between Hancock and Deposit districts. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Stand for the pledge, please, if you can.
The Board of Deposit, we have a quorum, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thank you, Cliff.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. We appreciate you taking the time away from your family and your day to join us. So if you noticed on your agenda, it looks a little bit different from another board meeting, any other typical board meeting you would attend. This board meeting is a meeting between the two boards. You'll see that the public piece is a Q&A. So we'll have a presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A period, so you can ask some questions. We've got microphones here and here in the front, so feel free to come on up and ask your questions. And then we'll move into the session where the boards will have a discussion about whether or not they are going to enter into an agreement together. So it looks a little different. We wanted to walk through it. At this time, what I'd like to do is have the board, both boards, introduce themselves. So I'm going to pass the mic, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vicki Bogart. I'm a member of the Hancock Central School Board.
Hello, I'm Dawn Faulkner, member of the Deposit Central School District.
Dick Hazen, Hancock Central School District Board.
Julie Martin, Deposit Central School.
Tammy Weedson, District Clerk, Hancock Central School.
Jake Gear, Hancock Central School District Vice President. Cliff Johnston, President, School Board for Hancock.
Dean Price, Deposit Central, President, School Board.
John Lanner, Vice President of Deposit Central School Board.
Ruth Lofdell, District Clerk, Deposit Central School. And we have some special guests. I have Rebecca Stone. She's the Broome-Tioga-Losee Superintendent. And I have Mike Rulo, who is the DCMO Superintendent. So they are here as our special guests today to walk us through, obviously, all this lovely information we're going to get tonight. And of course, my other right hand, Denise Cook, Superintendent, Deposit Central School District. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Deposit, for coming down to the meeting. Purpose of the joint meeting tonight is to discuss the possibility of a merger study between our districts. The study will be just that. It's going to be a study to determine if it's feasible and if it makes sense to merge districts. The study will give us the info and the numbers needed in order to make an educated decision about merger. In the end, when all the info is presented, it will be up to you guys, the taxpayers of the districts, to approve or deny merger. Tonight is only about the study to go forward. In a little bit, we'll have an open segment for any questions that you might have. So please bring any questions or concerns to the table. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Denise Cook, Superintendent of Deposit Central Schools. I just want to really share with you what we've already done as two districts. Many of you may have experienced some of the previous merger study that was done, but I will tell you it was done in 1992, so it was a few years ago. Doesn't seem like that long ago, but it was a few years ago, and there was a full merger study done at that time. There were findings about the benefits for the districts, but also there were concerns at the time about merging. And I think, 32 years, 33 years has passed since 1992. Certainly, we've had a lot of successes over the years as independent districts.
Now we've had a lot of successes as with shared services and some merges, including our athletic merges, which have had a lot of successes. And so we want to revisit, because if any of you work with our schools or you see our school budgets and our state aid situation, you know that our rural small schools are really faced with a challenge of how do we raise the money that we need to make the programs available to our students that they deserve. So, our hands are tied with certain things as far as how much revenue we can raise and how many mandates we have on our school districts to meet for our kids, and what our kids in Deposit and Hancock deserve as well, right? We want them to have all of the amazing programs that other school districts have to offer. And so to that end, we've done a lot of sharing already. As you know, we're sharing some teaching staff, we're sharing occupational therapists, we're sharing some chemistry and physics. We've shared professional development opportunities. In 2012, Alan Pohl did a shared services study with many, many recommendations about what the districts could share, including professional development opportunities and all the things that we're already doing right now that we started to do back then. So they've been successful and we've eased into them. They are not always easy. As you know, we have two communities, we have independent identities, and we have successfully been able to do some sharing with that. But we come to the table and talk about what we need to fix and how difficult it is sometimes, because we have different schedules, we have different transportation issues, different facilities for these things. So it's a process, and so we're here to continue that process. Obviously, in 1992, there wasn't a real sense of urgency for the need to merge. That's what the taxpayers came out and said. And as Cliff said, in the end, taxpayers get to decide in this situation. So tonight really is not about, it's not about all the nitty-gritty of merging, and you'll hear a lot more from our guests, Rebecca and Mike, who are the superintendents of the BOCES. But it's really about, should we even look at that again? Should we look at a merger study and see if it's feasible? So with that said, I would like to introduce, I think Rebecca, are you up first? Mike Rulo, superintendent of the DCMO BOCES. Mike.
It's a bit of a delicate dance up here with all of these partners, right? Try to position myself so that I want to make sure I'm addressing the board, but certainly giving our audience members a little bit of information as well tonight. And so for anybody who's kind of wondering why is this guy from DCMO BOCES and my colleague, my distinguished colleague from Broome Taiga BOCES here. So part of our role as district superintendents is to represent the state education department. And certainly you can imagine the implications that exist when two school districts are considering moving in a direction like a merger. And so we're here just to be supportive of the process, to provide some information, to be intermediaries between the state education department and the Office of Facilities Planning and you, so that you have all of the information that you need to make the very best decision that you can make for your school district as a board. And of course, the constituency as well has the information that they need to make sure that their voice and their perspective is heard. So we're going to run through probably a relatively quick presentation. I think kind of broken into a few different parts. Just some kind of baseline foundation setting with some definitions, like what is this thing called reorganization? I'm going to hand the microphone over to Rebecca when I'm finished, and she's going to get into some of the process. And then at the end, we'll just talk about some of the benefits of a potential merger. And really and I'll probably say this again, the purpose there is just to kind of plant some seeds as to the types of information that should emerge through this process that individuals would use as they're making a decision whether to support this or not. Okay, and as the folks have said, some Q&A time, and really want people to have a good foundation of information as this first meeting in this process. The first of what is very likely to be a lot of meetings throughout this process for all the obvious reasons. Okay, if you have a question, and I think this goes for both of us, please ask during the presentation so that it will just kind of help to move things along and fill in any of those gaps that we might create. Fair enough? So So it's a pleasure to be here to support you all as we engage in this work. So what is school district reorganization? This is a statutory process that allows districts to do the kinds of things that you're looking to do. We've already heard the word merger being considered, and that actually is very specific when you talk about merger, and I'll get into that in a subsequent slide. But it basically says this is a reorganization process that can take two districts and make them one, right? You'll notice that the goal here is to create a larger, arguably more efficient school district with more opportunity. And by the way, there's going to be lots of overlap in the things that we discuss, right? Some of it by design, because there's something in education that's repeat to remember, right? If we say it more than once, it's more likely to get sticky. And we want some of these things that are really important leverage points in this process to be sticky. You'll notice in this particular slide, it talks about the opportunity that exists, right? So school districts have never been permanently fixed in New York State. And if you were to look at the history of school districts, you would know that a long time ago, there were a lot more school districts than the roughly 700 that exist in New York State right now. And so statutorily, there's a process that can be followed to continue to revise school district boundaries in New York State. You can see the reference to the education law there. And you can also see an indication that the Commissioner of Education is keenly interested in these processes. And I'll tell you that the Commissioner of Education is an important partner in this process, and that certain pieces of this can only move forward when the Commissioner of Education authorizes it to move forward. And so what happens through the study, the feasibility and the merger study process is information flow from Deposit-Hancock up to the department's consideration back to your districts, right, and to the constituents of your districts, right? And so there's some information flow that this is continuing to move forward with some support, but that we need to hear the voice of the people in order to take next steps. And if you need a cure for insomnia, take a read on the master plan. I promise you won't get through more than just a few pages. So, again, obvious reasons why reorganize, and Denise already alluded to some of these things. And I think that these two school districts, through the history of the cooperative work that you've done, understand when some sharing goes really, really well, great things happen for students and for staff, right? And ultimately for your communities. And that's really what's articulated here, right? This is about more resource, more programming, more support services, more revenue, right? And as much as we don't want it always to be about money, it makes a big difference, right? In terms of what can be offered and how your communities can be supported. And you'll see that very last bullet point there about reorganization incentive building aid. We'll touch on that at the end. Again, that's another one of those seed planting kind of opportunities where merged districts do have some incentive on the building aid side of this process. But getting a little too far ahead of ourselves, I think, if we were to dig in on that a little bit. But the good news is, right, it's kind of a soup to nuts support when there's a successful merger, right, from all the program implications. Whoops, wow, we're done. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for coming on. Okay. So there are a couple of different types of reorganization that are possible. Centralization is one of those. And you can see that means that a new school district is created that includes the entire area of the school districts being merged. And notice that the districts have to share a boundary line, which we know, of course, is the case with Deposit and Hancock. Okay. There are several different types of school districts in New York State. Central school districts, which you both are. There's also things like union school districts. free districts, right? City school districts, things of that nature. So if you happen to look at any of the literature, you're really gonna wanna pay attention to central school districts and things that are specific to central school districts. And I would say that to all of you as well. If you decide you wanna do some of your own homework, don't get lost in the verbiage of what applies to other district types. It's gonna be specific to central school districts because that's what both of your districts are, okay? The other type is annexation. I don't want to be presumptive, but I don't believe that that's been part of the conversation so far in terms of annexing. And that's basically that one district kind of becomes part of another, right? And so in this case, Hancock would become part of the deposit district or vice versa. Deposit would become part of Hancock. My understanding is that the intent here is to talk about merger where the two districts become one. And so Rebecca's going to talk about some process pieces.
Yes, please. If I'm clicking at the same time, we're all in trouble. I don't have enough hands. So I'm going to talk about starting the reorganization process. I'm going to go through the whole thing with you, and it's important that everyone understands exactly what the steps are. The more transparency you can have in your process, the better off you're going to be. You don't want anyone to be surprised anywhere along the line. So when you start looking at a reorganization process, you're looking at districts that are starting to already share things. So my understanding is you have extracurriculars, everything but bowling. Yay, yay. You even have a mascot for sports that's the same. You are sharing classes, you are sharing many different things. And so this group is prime for having this kind of conversation. It's groups that started from scratch that is really difficult, but the fact that you work so well together means that it's a good opportunity to start looking at this. See, this is why I can't move slides. Okay. Step one. So the very first step that needs to happen is the two boards need to be able to get together, thus is what you're seeing here, and have a conversation and determine if you are interested in doing a reorganization study. So that's step one. Within this process, all the way through this process, you have access to two people who can get you the answers if they don't have the answers. So the job of Mr. Rule and myself is to make sure that we're neutral and that we get you any information that you might need along the way. The second step is if the Board of Education agree to formally do a feasibility or a reorganization study. So you would commission that, and how that works is your boards together would decide if you wanted to go forward with a study. Then you would have a recommendation that your attorneys would give you, and each board would vote separately to decide if you want to do that reorganization study. The next step is to put out an RFP or a request for proposals. So there are not a lot of groups in New York State that do this kind of study. We were talking about this today. We know that there are two out there that do really well with this. So you put out a request for proposal, and in that request, there's going to be a number of different things. But you also need to know that that proposal costs money. So if you're going down this road, you need to know that that study will cost generally anywhere between $65,000 and $105,000. That would be split between the two districts. And State Ed has been listening to the fact that this is a burden on districts. So what they're currently working on is making this aidable. So if you ask me today if it's aidable, the answer is no. But the person that we talked with, David Elliott, we talked to him today, and he said that they were working on that with the finance department and making this type of thing aidable. So if you decided to go forward, know that you would probably have to pay, or you may have to pay the full amount, but there is also a really good chance that it'll be aidable before it's done. So I just wanted to be very transparent in that. So part of the study is done for a specific reason. So it's to let the Board of Education understand the two districts. It's for all of the people in the community to see so that they understand what both districts have to offer and what this might mean for both of them. And it also is going to be read by the Commissioner of Education. So when she goes through this study, she's looking at a number of different things. She looks at student enrollment, if the two districts come together, looking at the programs that we have available or you have available, transportation, facilities, staffing, athletics. So this study will go through a number of different things, including finances, looking at revenues, your tax rates, incentives that go with that. Also, it's going to look at your current and projected professional staff. It's going to look at your programs and your curricula. And this is, when you hit this kind of thing, this is when people start asking, well, what's going to happen with this? What's going to happen with my administrators? What's going to happen with my teachers? And they're all really good questions. And that's what the study's for. The study is to have an outside person look at everything on both districts and give recommendations. But that's the piece you have to remember. This is a recommendation. So ultimately, it is going to be the job of the board to decide what happens next. So when they look through that, I wanted to make sure that I went through and looked. It looks at the impact for both, and it also will give you information on mergers and annexation. So that study will give you all of the information. Not that you're going to do one or the other, not that we're looking at annexation, but I know that it will be part of that. All right, so let's look at the next step. So step 3, the Board of Education would then share the information from this feasibility study. And I am going to stress the fact that you want to be as transparent as possible. And what that means is that you're going to be doing the roadshow a lot. It's important that every portion of your community understands what that feasibility study says. In some cases, that means people coming to board meetings. In some cases, that means you going to them. But the more information you can give them, the better off this will be. So you're going to have meeting dates and times. You're going to discuss the topics. You're going to encourage people to ask questions. Ask every question you can think of. And you're going to be encouraged to be very honest about it. So once you've gone through that, this is where the processes start kicking in. So step 4 is the board needs to decide one of 2 ways. So in the past, they've always done a straw vote. And what a straw vote is that in each district, on a particular day, you would hold a vote, and people in each district would vote, yes, they want to move forward, or no, they don't want to move forward. In that case, if either district decides that that's not something they want to move forward with, then you don't have the support of your community, and it doesn't move forward. Recently, they've come up with another thing that you can do. It's called a petition. And what they're finding is the petitions really work better than the straw vote. Because what a petition does is you go out into the community and you talk with people. It actually gets the word out there on a more consistent basis. And when you do a petition, there's an actual number you have to get. So it's the number of signatures that is required for each district is the 3-year average of the total ballots cast in each budget vote plus 1. So if Deposit had 100 people vote as the average in the 3rd year, or those 3 years, it would be 101 petition signatures you'd have to get. And then it would be the same for Deposit, whatever your 3-year average is plus 1. And that is not done on a particular day, it's done over time. Once again, it does allow you to really get out into the community and have those conversations with people. Once you have that number of votes, then you can move forward. And what happens is we will give that information to the commissioner. Now, it's important to note that either a straw vote or a petition is not binding. So if I vote yes on whatever that day is, or I put my name on that ballot, I can change my mind later. So it's not binding, but it's necessary. So the commissioner has to have that before we move to step 5. So step 5 is the BOE superintendents, both Mike and I would report the number of straw votes or the petition to the commissioner through a formal letter. And that's what will start the legal statutory portion of the the reorganization process. So in the next slide, this is where the glasses need to come. So in the next slide, what this does is it shows you both centralization and annexation. So really, the difference between them is if that petition went to the commissioner and you were annexing, then what would happen is people would have to petition in order to stop it. Centralization is a little different. So centralization, the commissioner issues the order and says the process can now start. Then eligible voters from each district must request the vote by petition for centralization to occur. So it gets a little confusing. What that means is that we would need a petition from each district from people in the community saying we want the centralization vote to continue. It would also, through another petition that goes hand in hand, it would say if you want the vote to happen in one location or 2. Usually when we do something like this, you want to make sure that you have access to both communities. So usually in this case, the second petition would say we want to have a voting location in both districts. So once those petitions come back, and it's the same petition process that you had before, then you would have an order from the commissioner. Hold on, glasses need to come down again. The order from the commissioner would set up the voting location. And in that vote, you would need 50% plus 1. So you need a majority vote, and there would actually be 3 petitions on the vote. The first petition would be if you would merge or you would reorganize together. The second proposition would be, sorry, I meant proposition, not petition. The second proposition would be how many board members would be on the newly reorganized board. And you have a choice between 5, 7, or 9 board members. And then the third proposition would be how many years the board members would then serve. So this was done in another district when they reorganized recently. And the vote was approved. They decided in that particular case that they were going to have 7 members and that it was a 3-year term. So what they did is they had the first 3 people for 3 years, the next 2 people for 2 years, and the last one for 1. So you can get that cycle going because you don't want everyone to go at the same time. We know how hard it is to get board members. You want to make sure that you have a cycle going with that. And then you would have 1 more vote, and that would be who your new board members were. So once you voted on that, your board members, your newly elected board members would start their work before July 1st, because that's when the switchover would happen. Your newly elected board members would need to do a couple of things right off the bat. They'd need to make sure that you had an interim superintendent until you selected who your superintendent was going to be. You'd have to have a board clerk appointed. You'd have to have an attorney appointed. And you'd have to have an address because you need a new beds number to start all of that. So the whole thing sounds a little complicated, but it's important that you know there are a lot of steps with this. The spot where a couple of districts where they merged failed is because the community didn't understand the steps ahead of time. And it just seemed like one more thing, one more thing. But this is the process for creating a new district. Doing good so far? All right. So I think we are up to the benefits, which I'm going to turn back over to Mr. Rulo.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, lots of process, right? But very deliberate and as we discussed for a reason, so artfully done. Thank you for that. We do want to talk a little bit about the incentive operating aid, right? It's a big piece of this puzzle. Is like kind of sweetens the deal, if you will, in terms of what's available to the let's talk like it's a merged district. Right, and so you'll notice that there is some additional state aid that's apportioned to a new school district to support expenses resulting from that reorganization, and it's available for 14 years beginning in the first school year. It's the same for the first 5 years. Look at I'm just going to bring my computer spreadsheet here. 5. For the first 5 years, it's a prorated 40% of the base year operating aid. So in the 24-25 school year, for both districts, it's about $5.5 million. Don't quote me on the numbers. By the way, and this is in one of the slides coming up, the feasibility study is going to lay all of this information out to a T, right? Like artfully, it will be good information for you and for you. Right, so what did that guy say in that first meeting? It was how much money? No, it'll be in black and white so that everybody's keenly aware of exactly what the numbers are through the study. But it's about, just for the sake of conversation, right? The base aid is about $5.5 million for each district. They do 40% of that, right? So you'll have about $4.4 million of additional aid for those first 5 years, and then it diminishes by 4% each year thereafter. For 14 years, all right, through the 14th year, not for 14 more years, through the 14th year, at which point it goes to 0, right? So all in, it's estimated to be about $42 million of additional money beyond what your districts would currently realize with the current structure, right? Over those 14 years, about $42 million of new money. And that's just on operating aid, okay? This is also a really important slide, especially on the right-hand side there. You can see that local tax rate. So my home district, many years ago, they went through a very similar study with a neighboring district. The tax rates were remarkably different, and it was a deal breaker, right? Because one district was going to win and one district was going to lose. The losers were going to have tax rates increase significantly. Right? Nobody likes that. And so it was kind of a non-starter. Trying to be as objective as possible, but when you look at $13.72 and $13.65, right? Almost to the penny, same tax rates. So it's a really good starting point for the two districts. And I can tell you that when we met with state ed folks and they looked at this, right? That's a good starting point. Okay, so again, and you'll notice in the note there, the feasibility study will map all of this out in terms of what is that number going to be when you look at how to equalize it, if you will, through the two districts. Okay. And then, as we talked about earlier, there is some incentive building aid. It gets a little bit in the weeds here, but I think it's important to know that in addition to the general operating aid for our programming, there's also some incentive for building aid. In particular, what's bolded at the bottom is an important consideration. So new projects have to start within 10 years of the reorganization to take advantage of that building aid ratio. There's a lot of technical information in here, but the good news is that it really kind of like maxes out the building aid in a way that makes it very affordable, very palatable for the new district to engage in that process if that's what needs to be done, right? You might have to do some facilities enhancement to meet, current or some emerging needs of your new school district. And then you can see these bullet points here in terms of renovating existing facilities and existing capital debt. You'll see that approved projects for current buildings without adding new space are aided at the enhanced building aid ratio. Some information about maximum cost allowance for those existing buildings will not be reduced if no new space is added. Right? And that just talks about how much project you can do. If you're unfamiliar with maximum cost allowance, MCA, it's how much project you can do and receive aid back on that project. And then that last bullet point, the education department will adjust building aid payments for existing capital debt to match the higher of the two previous districts' building aid ratios. So it's not enhanced, but it is kind of increased to match the higher of the two districts. Okay. So again, what you see is everything kind of pointed at providing maximum benefit that's allowable under regulatory language or statutory language in order to incentivize and really support the new school district in their efforts. Questions on those last few slides?
So do you have any idea what our current building aid is? What that be? What's that?
It's 63%, so, and ours is 78, so they would go with that higher.
So the question was, do we have any idea what the current building aid is? And it was 63% in deposit and 78% in Hancock.
So building aid ratios, there's different aid ratios for things. So what that means is how much money do we get back from the state for different purposes? And it's confusing because there's different percentages for different things. So Hancock and Deposit have low ratios. And so for example, 78% sounds awesome to me because at 63%, so for every $1 million we're spending, we're footing the bill for 40% of that. Other districts who you would think need the money less, but the state doesn't think so on paper. Other districts, have building aid ratios upwards of 90%, and that's not uncommon. So a lot of districts, for example, the Windsor Central School District might do a project and they're going to get 90% of their money back from the state, but in Deposit we're only getting 63% and Hancock's getting 78%. So I just wanted to explain a little bit how that works.
Thank you. I'll take 78% for now. All right, so just to recap what Mike and Rebecca had walked through, what would a timeline be? So we try to put something together that just laid out what a timeline might look like. So if the boards decided, yep, let's go through, let's invest in this feasibility study and get the data that we need, we would resolve to undergo that study, obviously in the spring. In the summer, the study would begin in earnest, and that's when between those two time periods, we would run that RFP, figure out who we were going to go with, and then move forward from there. They'd start the study. In the fall, those final drafts would be available to us, and that's when we would be going on that roadshow, getting the information out to our communities, making sure we're answering questions, getting answers that maybe we don't have answers to. So that would be really a time for all of us to get on the same page and figure out what else are we missing here? What else do we need? From there, in the fall and winter, we would either proceed or we're going to keep going. And again, that's kind of when you're looking at maybe that straw vote, maybe you're looking at those petitions to see where are we at in public sentiment here. And obviously, if the two communities were like, yeah, let's do this, let's move forward. In the early spring, we would have that statutory vote. That would be the vote where we might go to the polls in maybe a central location, and then either we would move forward or we would not. And I know we keep saying this over and over, the community will decide. it is the community's decisions to make. So they would make that decision, and then we could, as early as July 1, begin to move forward with the districts operating as one. But that's where those steps would come in, where we would say, are we going to be, centralized? Yes, we're going to. So all those other steps that Rebecca walked through, where there's additional voting, would take place then too. Questions? Dean, I'm going to turn it over to you. At this point, we'll move into our next section on our agenda.
At this time, we'd like to go into some public comment on the presentation for this evening. If you have any questions for the boards, the purpose of it is so that we get input from the public about some questions and answers with the presentation on the merge study. Well, we'd ask that each participant stand within the microphones, announce your name and the community you're from. We ask to stay within 5 minutes. We want to hold this to a maximum of 45 minutes, just in the essence of time. No personal attacks or tolerant will be, we won't put up with that. We ask that and believe that we appropriate our behaviors to our children to the highest levels, to include the board. So if anyone would like to speak at this time, please come to the mics. We'll have the appropriate people answer your questions, or if you just have specific comments.
So the microphones are in the front, everybody, and no question is a wrong question. We might not have answers today because I think a lot of the questions that are on our minds are what will the study tell us? What will the recommendations be? And as I say that, I have some questions that I'll probably ask our guests that aren't even the right time for this, but I have questions on my mind as well. So please feel free to come forward with any questions you have. And I want you to know that Mike and Rebecca understand small rural schools. Rebecca was the superintendent in Marathon, and Mike was the superintendent in Harpersville. So they understand the challenges we're all facing to make sure our kids get great programming with all the fiscal restraints that we have right now. So I appreciate your help with this. And it's not easy work. Okay.
My name is Christine Klein. I live here in Hancock. I'm sorry, I'm going to be really negative. I think it's bonkers to spend money. You're complaining about not having money, and you want to spend money. No, thank you. We're already all together. I think we don't need the study to know what we want to do as a community. We don't always spend the money on writing grants. We're paying for a grant writer to actually get us money. Or the Hancock Education Foundation, which is something besides scholarships, they can support the school itself. What happened to the strategic planning from last year? That went nowhere. And so to me, honestly, all this seems desperate. You're looking to solve a problem that we can't solve because they don't want to give us money. Asking for grants for specific, asking for money for these things, we get specific money for the incentives. And sorry, if it just goes to certain expectations for departments or whatever you want to call it, I don't see how that actually helps. If we're super limited, there's one category that I think actually helps besides structures, and that's actually helping the children with supplies and education and all of that. That's a small paragraph of help. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Turn the mics up down there. Guys, if you could get a little closer to the mics.
Randy Karofsky. I'm going to ask the same question that I've asked. Hancock does accept Wayne Highland students, so I'm wondering if that's going to continue. And as a parent, can I vote? Because I'm not a resident of New York. That's a question. Okay.
That's a good, okay.
Sure.
So we had this question before, if you currently tuition in students and the new board decides that they want to continue with that process, they can still tuition in students.
Right, and when this all process goes through, can I vote?
That's a good question, and that's the one that I will find the answer for you.
Okay, thank you.
One question that I have that maybe can kind of speak also to, ties into the first question. So I think you've heard a little bit about the financial piece. It's not insignificant. I mean, our job, you will have your vote, right? So our job is to just really present all the opportunities, because one thing that I want to talk about in thinking proactively for both districts is what happens if one of us becomes unable to run basic mandatory programs due to the finances. I know we talked about different models. Is there a point at which the state intervenes and says you are no longer able to run your district? Or is that something that would come from our end?
So I think what you're asking is, can two school districts be forced to merge? Or annex. As far as being forced to merge, that is something that is dependent on the Commissioner of Education. The current Commissioner of Education that we have does not believe that forcing any school district to do something like that is appropriate. So my understanding is at this point, there is no forced mergers. There is no forced annexations. However, if a school district gets to a point where they're running in the red, they can't afford to run their programs, there might be an intervention that happens at that point. But I don't believe either district is at that point. I think more what you're looking at is, can your districts offer student programs that are equivalent to other school districts around the state? And if the answer is no, that's what you should be thinking about. How would you do that? And I know that you're sharing right now, so it might just be shares, it might be reorganization. There are different ways that you can do that, but there's no forcing this.
Anybody else have questions or comments?
Good evening, Chris Gross from Hancock Central School District. So my first question is, what provoked all this? The thought of such a radical move? Was it like every 10 years, this is something that we do? Or what's the motive behind this?
I mean, we can try to speak to that. I think, Chris, so it's been about 30 years, and I'm not sure what prompted the first look at it, to be honest with you. Like every other district whose numbers are dwindling, I think we're looking at the fact that there's a lot of, whether it's opportunities for extras that our students don't necessarily get because we cannot do it financially. Every year that we're trying to make the budget work with less state aid or zero state aid increases based on the past couple of years, we're trying to offer opportunities to look at it for both communities. So as far as, like Rebecca said, you've got to be transparent, you've got to be transparent. We want to bring people out, we want to talk about it. It's on our minds about the future of both districts. And we want to pursue everything so taxpayers can make an educated decision about what happens in their districts and have a look at it.
I know for me coming in, I was gaining the history of kind of what was happening within the district. And prior to moving into the superintendency of being the K-12 principal, we had conversations where we were meeting to discuss all the shares that we were providing or having every single year. So every year, both districts were getting together and they were having joint board meetings or joint meetings to just kind of gauge the temperature. Where are we at? How are the shares going? How are the merged sports going? I think it just kind of lent itself, especially after last budget year, to say, where is the state going with state aid, and can we survive this and still offer all the kids the things that they deserve? And I think Denise and I can speak to what other districts have to offer that we cannot. And it's not because we don't want to, it's because we can't. We literally cannot fund it. And that's just simply not fair. It is not fair to our students. They should be able to have all of the opportunities that all the other students in public schools have, in extracurriculars and things. So for us, it's, can we provide these opportunities, and how do we go about doing that? We share what's out there. We seek data, we seek information. We provide that to the public, and again, you guys will make that decision. It's the community's decision. Nobody up here will be actually making that decision. It will boil down to the community to say yes or no.
I also, just to touch on a couple of things. So yes, it's getting harder to make that happen. So I think in my mind, I'm looking at, and then Dean, I know you might want to speak, the board presidents might want to speak. It's getting harder to make things happen, right? So there's costs that are out of control, and we all know that. Health insurance costs for special programming that is required for students, that is just exponential and very hard to control. And so we're faced with, in order to keep what we have to keep for kids, or then we're down to the bare bones. And as far as grants go, we have benefited greatly from grants. I can tell you today, we just got word, we had applied in deposit for a $50,000 grant from the United States Department of Agriculture to develop agricultural curriculum and keep our green thumb running and expanding. And I got notice today that that program was canceled. So for the next year. So like grants are hard to secure, but we keep fighting for those, but they're certainly not guaranteed. And they're nothing that I could run a district on. They provide the extras, but they're not guaranteed. I'll pass this over to the board presidents.
Thanks, Chris.
I have a couple more questions. Are you answering this question?
Yeah, you got another one?
Yeah, I got two more.
Okay, what do you want me to wait? You can go ahead.
So for the gentleman from DCMO, you mentioned two types of reorganization, and both seem to be regarding consolidation and merger. That seems to be an indelible action. Is there any example of districts that reversed out of a merger? Have you ever heard of that? Okay, so merger would be a pretty absolute process.
Now you're talking once they've merged completely to back out?
Yeah, I was curious if it had ever been undone. Let's say fortune's reversed, and no, okay, fair enough. So I guess if you all do vote to study a merger, is the merger study going to consider the intangibles like community pride, community identity, rather than just fiscal factors? Thank you.
Let me just try to answer that last one you had. In reviewing the last study, they took all that into consideration. How pride runs schools, and we're not looking to take any of that away. We're looking to see what can merge from this. As the process started with football and athletics, I don't think anyone has ever lost their identity. And my goal as a board member is, number one, provide the best education to our students at the best possible cost. That's my goal, my personal goal. I'm not speaking for the board, is that I want to see excellence in our districts. But it also has to be on the taxpayers to support that. And me being a taxpayer, I take both of those issues very important. Number one, excellence. Number two, the cost that it takes to get there. And three is not losing those identities. We're DH, we're lumberjacks, we're Eagles. We have not forgotten where we've come. We've shared as a board and as a district both, and kept those high standards. So that's just my personal opinion.
And just to expand on that, we felt it was the next logical step to enter into at least a conversation to have a study or the possible merger. The shares, since the sports program started, are successful. Our new shares with our administrations and everything else seem to be working good. I mean, nothing's perfect. But that being said, we'll be stronger together, hopefully with healthcare and future funding, and we don't know where the state's gonna go with a lot of this stuff, so.
Just a little bit of additional food for thought. This is more for the board to consider. If you were to move forward, oftentimes when two districts are engaging in a feasibility study, there is the generation of some community focus groups that the consultants will often engage with. And so to the gentleman's point in the question around how do you make sure that you're drawing out the community sentiment in terms of some of the feelings, that it's not just dollars and cents. Those structures help to ensure that information gets captured from the public and is reflected in the document. And so that's something for the boards to consider in terms of, if you were to work with those consultants, what are the things that you want to make sure are happening? So that some of that information isn't lost. And then I just kind of want to go back to this slide at the end of that first paragraph there. Right? And I think that both Denise and Lori talked about this, but I think it can't be understated that focusing on the educational needs of students in your two school districts, while considering a sufficient tax base to support the expenses related to that mission, is really fundamental to this process. And so you have to ask yourself, what would we need to do in our respective school districts to generate the revenue that is available to us if we were to merge, right? In other words, so I'll give you hard numbers looking through the bifocals here. This year, the 24-25 foundation aid base year in deposit is $5.691 million. And in Hancock, it's $5.303 million. The additional incentive aid is almost $4.4 million, right? So you're talking about almost the equivalent of each of the districts currently. And just, again, think about what would we need to do in our school districts to, even if you take half of that for each school district, right? What is the impact on the tax base if we needed to generate $2 million of new money? That isn't necessarily coming through foundation aid, right? So there's a question around why now, right? 30 years ago this happened. Is this just every 10 years? I can tell you that a year ago, there weren't a lot of districts talking about this process because it was an old set of rules for the incentive aid. And last year, through the budget development process up in Albany, the legislature enacted some new rules that, quite frankly, sweetened the pot significantly. Now, what I can't tell you is what the number would have been under last year's rules for your school districts. But I can tell you that it is, I'm not talking about like $100,000 of additional money. It's probably in the millions of new money. And so that has made districts think a little bit differently, right? About maybe it's the right opportunity to reapproach the conversation to make sure that we're not necessarily leaving anything on the table that could really support our school districts and enhance our programming to meet the needs of our students.
Thank you, Mike. And I think to Mr. Gross's question, same thing. I think what my wonder was, we're already doing a lot of this work, as you know. So what if it didn't look tremendously different from what we're already doing? I could be wrong about that because I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm saying, like, what if the recommendations were not so far off base from what we were already doing, but there would be $4 million extra for us to run the district as a combined. So that was my thought in favor of programs for kids and for taxpayers to have this money come up that didn't have to come out of immediately our tax base.
So I do want to be clear, you can't do the same thing you're doing now. So if you do a reorganization, you can't have 2 different buildings, 2 different mascots. You would have to combine. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. So the question is, where would the kids go to school? And the answer is, we wouldn't know yet, because that's part of what the feasibility study is. They will give recommendations, but it is up to the new board, not even the current board, the new board to determine. So I can tell you what's been done in other places. In other places where there's 2 different buildings, they move students so that all of the junior, senior high school students went to one building and all the elementary students went to another building. And that's the one I know of. Roscoe's, they're still in the process. Yeah. Roscoe just finished their vote, and they just voted in their new board, and so now they're in the process of determining the next steps.
Anyone else like to speak?
Hi, I'm Gloria White. I'm from the Hancock district. As our board members know, I'm here a lot, but I guess I have a couple of questions. The first is, I know that we get refunded through aid for things that, buildings and any kind of things that we're rebuilding. So I guess I'm confused as to how much do we know, first of all, when we get these boards together, and are we gonna know like anything about staff? Are we gonna know anything about where kids are going? I know there are a lot of things that I don't know, and I don't know how this process works. So that, I guess that's one question, is what happens to everyone? Like, do we have staff? Do we have the same staff? Are they all going to have to update the resumes? And I can't imagine that. But the second, I know you say that we get money back, 78%. Where's the other 33% come from? Because we have to pay that. Taxpayers have to come up with that money. I understand a lot of it is refundable, but there's a lot that is not. So how do we do that? Our kids, like, I know that Pennsylvania students have been very, very important in this school forever. I worked here 31 years, so it was before my time when the first merger was suggested and gone through, and I didn't know really anything about that. But I think that's a concern. You know, I say my Pennsylvania kids, because they were, some of them, my kids, and they're an important part of our community, not just in 9th grade. Those kids play T-ball. They're a part of our community for years. So I think, you know, I think that's an important part. There was something else that I'm getting old. So I guess there's so many questions that we don't know. I don't really know what else I want to ask. because I don't feel like I know enough about the whole process to do a good job here. I think I would like to know more, what will we know and what will we actually vote on, rather than just, are we going to let our boards then make those decisions?
And so I think that you articulate exactly the reason that a robust feasibility study needs to be conducted and the information shared with all of you so that it begins to fill in those gaps, right? So that there's no intention of trying to make a decision tonight about whether or not there's going to be a merger. There's a whole bunch of process and information sharing that needs to happen, as has been laid out here, in order to give you the information that you need. The goal is to make sure that all of the questions are answered so that you can make the very best decision you can make. Of course, if there are gaps in that information, then that might lead a person to a different conclusion, right? But we're very preliminary in the process in that way, with a lot of information that needs to be collected and shared over the course of many, many months. This feasibility study is not something that's done, in a month or two. It is a lengthy process that they really dig deep.
I was just gonna say, I know we don't have the answers, but when we did meet with a gentleman from the state, like the question about staffing, of course, is something I think in our district, we've been trying to right size our staff over the years. So based on our numbers, as people retire and we look at that and decide if we need to refill that position based on the number of kids we have in different sections. I know this gentleman said if you're right sized, it's very likely for many positions that no, there's not going to be a loss of jobs. There's definitely going to be a loss of job at my level and Lori's level. Obviously, you're going to have a merged district and a one superintendent. And that might be true for some other administrative positions, although both of our districts, are not teaming with administrators like some districts. So I think that was his message at that time was, that's not likely to affect if we are right sizing as we're going along.
And just to clarify, the building aid, the 78% is what we get right now. And you're right, our community does have to figure out that gap. But if we did go into study or we did end up into merger, what the incentive piece is here is up to 95%, which we would get because they go with the higher rate. So it bridges that gap, makes that gap smaller for what we would have to tap into the community for, if that makes sense.
I think to answer some of Gloria's concerns and her questions too, we have a lot of the same questions and a lot of the same issues and searching for the same kind of answers. I think that's what the study would bring a lot of that out. I know me and Dina spoke previously, and the biggest concerns that we had was we didn't want to lose our identities. I guess on paper we would be a new district, but we're still going to be Wildcats. We're still going to be Lumberjacks, in deep in heart and in school. That being said, too, we can take I feel that there's a way to take what this feasibility study is going to say and take the best of it if we see it going that way. I don't think we're bound by the state per se, but a lot of it we are, but I think we've come a long way so far with our shares, and I think we can continue to build off that.
Well, like Cliff said, I think we've got a lot of advantages by doing a study. Number one, it's going to tell us where we're at, where we can be, as far as positions, busings, buildings, all of that will be taken into consideration. I've had the opportunity to read this shared study from 30 plus years ago, and it's very interesting. So at the end of the day, the voters determine the future of what the shared comes out with. So by not doing the share, in my opinion, we're at a loss. We really need to take a look at all of our options financially, you know, with everything up front. And it's gonna take some time. And then we have the full information to move forward, or at that point, we decide to stop. Many districts have not went forward with a merge, have just stopped, but they had the opportunity to review studies to see what they can do in the future to change, maybe reduce some cost or increase some programs. So I think it's important, just personally, that we look hard at a study to determine what our options are. Anybody else, please want to speak?
I'm not actually against the concept of murder. So, which is the money for me. You say you want to know where we're at. How do you not know where we're at presently? That's your job. You should already know that. We don't need statistics to say, oh, well, you know, oh, we might make 13% more on something. No. You know where we're at. You know where the community's at. Remember, we're concerned about identity and jobs. These are the things that matter. You know what we want. Why don't you talk about it together instead of asking strangers? It's very strange to me. Well, that's about it, yeah. Why don't you know what we are? Thank you.
So as I went through the steps that are required for a merger, and we talked a little bit about the feasibility study, it's important that when you look at the two districts, you have an impartial person looking and making sure that you're really digging into all of the parts of a district. So in order for this to move forward, the feasibility study is required by the Commissioner of Education. If the board chooses to do it or not to do it, that is a decision-making point, but you cannot move forward without commissioning the study. The other piece of the study that is good to know is there are certain things that are required by the state education department to be in the study. You can add to those things if you had some thoughts that are not included in the initial RFP. But if the study is not thorough enough, then the commissioner will ask that they fill in whatever the blanks are. So there's a pretty high standard with the feasibility study, and it is required if you do move forward.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I was just curious if the RFP is sort of a boilerplate document, something that the board can look at, sort of like a Chinese menu, and, you know, are all the things on that RFP there that we need for both districts?
So I forgot to ask this before. Can you tell us your name?
John Allen
From Deposit. Okay, thank you. I'm going to go back to the other person who spoke to, just so that we can get that on record. So with the RFP, there's certain things that are required to be part of the RFP at the state education level, and the boards can add to the RFP, but the RFP also has a lot of legal pieces that are part of it. So there are portions of an RFP that are boilerplate, but you can add to it. And before the RFP goes out, it absolutely can be viewed by both boards so that you can see what's in it, see if there's anything that you want to add to it.
Good evening, Eric Lincoln with the Town of Deposit Board. Appreciate everybody coming out here tonight from both municipalities. Mrs. Cook, thank you for touching on a couple of things. Aside from the school districts, there are some economic, probably pluses or minuses for the municipalities. That would include roads, different infrastructure, things like that. Obviously, safety's first, the road's gotta be determined. Is there anything in the impacts, the studies that you guys have done that show where we would have to adjust our budgets to prepare for different things, traffic pattern changes, things like that? Will your report illustrate that, or have you seen in prior reports anything like that? Because that's something that we'll have to budget our municipalities, and there's costs to go with that.
So in the last study, did you see anything in the last study that would indicate?
I did, but, I can review that, Eric, and see if I can pinpoint some of those. I didn't focus on it, actually, it's quite a few pages, but I can get back to you on that.
Yeah, I mean, between the two towns and the villages, there's, if you include our friends, in Wayne Highlands as well as DOT, I've got 7, municipal entities that will be affected by this overall, if you look at the big picture on that. I mean, that's, again, that's 7 budgets, or at least 5 that will be impacted on that, to plan for overtime, snow removal, road repairs, all that stuff. So I just wasn't sure if you'd see impacts like that throughout New York State, and there's a lot of things that are coming down the pipeline on the municipal side of it. I can tell you probably were eye-opening, and they probably weren't a good eye-opener type of thing. So, these are things that are being driven down, just not the school side, but also at the municipal level as well, so.
So SED can't mandate anything for another portion of another organization. So I don't think that we would see anything official in the report. However, if either highway department or other departments within the community already have existing contracts with the district, so working together with districts, that would be something that I think you would need to look at.
That would include like fire, police, all those as well, aside from the highway department.
Well, for example, if you and the Deposit had an agreement where you shared fuel tanks and things like that, and shared the cost with that, that's the only thing I can think of. I have not heard of any other mergers that have caused waves with the highway department or the fire departments, because they also, for the most part, kept buildings in both places.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's safety first, right? That's what we're about, so, thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello, Christina Dufton, Hancock. I just have a quick question about the information that's gathered when they're looking at the study to decide if it's feasible to do these things, right? I know the districts have to give information so that they can talk about the enrollment and the staffing plan and the curriculum and transportation. Is there ever a point where the company who's going to do this study surveys community members or parents or teachers to get an idea of the real concerns that they see, or the things that they see that could be positive, things that they could see as like a real hard roadblock? Is that taken into consideration? Community parent or teacher surveys?
So I think that can be customized, and I know it was in the last study. It would be my intent that was a huge part of it. Probably, I mean, and again, there's only a couple people right now a couple groups doing these studies, but they're all about town hall kind of meetings for those stakeholders. I know that they are doing town hall meetings. They would probably do some sort of electronic piece for people who couldn't be in person. I think that's possible, that's like the biggest input we need, because the other stuff is very factual. So I would say they're gonna look at that.
And just to answer the question, in the last study, there was community efforts, committees that got together with board members to facilitate the community environment. There was also teachers committees, staff committees and stuff like that, that they interviewed, had committees that would put their input into the study. And that's our intent, is to input everything, not only just our staff, but also the public, the community, to get involved in committees and focus groups. And like they said, this is not a end process where you put it out, you farm it out to somebody else and you're done with it, they come back with recommendations. This is gonna be an ongoing, as you can see, it minimum 2 years to get this complete. And there's gonna be a lot of questions that are gonna be unanswered in the beginning, but that's how you get to those results.
And then I just, thank you, had one more follow-up thing on just something that I think I was confused about that was an answer to an earlier question. You all live in small places, so you know how the rumor mill works. So we've heard that maybe there would be middle school somewhere, high school somewhere, but then I thought one of your answers was that we couldn't have students in 2 places. But you're saying that that would still be an option, or we would have to go with a new build? I guess I would just like clarity on that as well.
So the first one I gave was an example of how another district did it. So they put the high school, middle school in one building and the elementary in the other. So what I'll clarify by saying is you can't keep things as they are. So currently you have, Hancock has a elementary, middle school, high school, and Deposit has an elementary, middle school, high school, and the two are pretty separate. You can't do that. You can't maintain 2 different districts and still call it a reorganization and do the reorganization funds that go with it. Does that make more sense?
That does make more sense.
Okay.
So I have another question. You get up here and you get blinded by the lights. That's what it is, I think.
We did that.
Oh, I did, okay. When they come back with the results of their finding, will they have given examples of different models like that? Or that would be something that the boards or the new board or who would be coming up with what the new model that we would be voting for looks like? I think this might piggyback on what Lori said. Like when we get to the point where we have to say vote yes or no, will we have a really clear picture of what the yes is or what the no is?
So they're gonna give recommendations of what it could be. And then I believe it's the new board that determines what it actually will be. But that leads to a little bit of confusion in between.
I agree, because we would have already had to vote yes for there to be a new board.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
So these are the great questions that people are gonna have that it's our job to make sure we get answers to.
Okay.
So that's going into my question pot.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're gonna do a Q&A where people can see what the Q&As are.
We can do something to push out people's questions and the answers that.
Yes. Good question.
On the staffing piece, Christine, and then I can tell you have another one.
No.
I just wanted to say, when we talked about the potential for new positions, for new programming for kids, for example, BOCES, close your ears, but we might, maybe we want to expand a carpentry program for kids or something like that. I think that's what, again, people ask, what was our thoughts about that? This is what we're thinking. How do we reach different opportunities for all kids that are really hard for us right now? Like, if you have kids who are interested in college opportunities so that they're getting those credits before they graduate, or if you have kids who are interested in heavy machinery, that maybe we can handle something like that with that additional funding. So actually, potentially new positions.
Would that be part of what we vote for? Like the whole picture thing, I'm going to just tell you, so I have control issues, right? And the idea of handing over a board who I don't know who they even are yet and saying, absolutely, do this, and having no idea of what this is, it's just scary. So I guess I would just say, I would like, before this goes to a vote, a really clear picture of what I'm voting for. Because I like just a big yes or a big no it's a really hard ask to ask everybody here who has to vote and make a good choice.
Well, and that's that's the point, is all this has to be out. The study has to be done, and all the issues have to be answered, so that you can vote. And if they're not answered, then you would vote no. As far as a new board, this is the current board. A new board process only starts when everybody is voted and the process is yes to merge. All the time in between is fact finding, getting the information you need, and providing the facts to do that, do that merge, if it becomes merged. And that's all it is. If it doesn't work the way that the public wants, you vote no, and but you've done the study, you know what your options are. You don't move forward with a no vote. And as far as board members, and I get you, you don't know who you would want to trust. Well, that process comes with a vote. Each board member, just as we all do, would run for election. And you're either voted in or you're voted not. So that's a process that takes effect after the study has been voted in and the merge has been approved.
I think that might be it for right now. Thank you.
Gotcha. I have just one final thing I was thinking is that I would feel not honest or transparent if as a superintendent, I did not bring the opportunity to the taxpayers. Again, with the knowledge that you can vote yes or no in the big picture, if we knew about it and didn't present it or explore the options, and people, were then upset that we left money on the table for a potential, if people do think it's a good idea, that I would really feel like I hadn't done my job for the kids or for the taxpayers to look at potentially bringing in income that doesn't raise the tax levy.
You just kind of took the words right out of my mouth. How about that? Sorry. We worked together for a long time, and so Denise has tried forever to get away from me, but here I sit right next to her. All joking aside, to your point, right? I know it seems like there's a suggestion of what should happen just by virtue of your respective boards bringing this conversation front and center. And I think Denise did a really nice job of articulating the why behind, like, the other side of if we didn't, right? There's a responsibility here. And so as Rebecca and I were working with our colleagues at the department earlier today up in Albany, it really kind of slapped us right in the face how many layers exist in this process to ensure that it is your will that is reflected in the ultimate outcome. Right? This isn't a quick, like, one vote, we're done. 2 votes, we're done. Right? There is a really lengthy process, and it will probably take a little bit of reflection, especially in terms of the slides that Rebecca presented, to see how many layers exist where you get a chance to express your voice and your perspective, and ultimately the community as a collective, the communities as separate collectives have the opportunity to do that. And so that should give you a little bit of maybe calm and some perspective, I would think, just in terms of knowing that there's no rush to judgment. There's no one person's ulterior motive that's going to, like, change the outcome one way or the other. It is the collective and the will of the communities. And it has to be both communities, not just one.
Anyone else?
My name's Bob Rice, and I'm a resident of Hancock, New York. And I wasn't going to speak because my voice is trying to quit on me, but I think I'd like to express that I kind of know where Chris Gross is coming from. This to me, this kind of popped out of the bushes. I'm kind of surprised by it. My grandchildren are getting excellent grades. The board is an excellent board. Everybody loves this community. Things are going so well. And I think everyone is comfortable doing what they're doing. I heard somebody say, well, we're gonna miss out on a lot of money. That money is taxpayer money. It comes out of your pockets and mine. I really hate it when we go there, but I just thought I'd bring that up. I'm just wondering, my background is metalworking, machinery, maintenance, and I never like to fix something that wasn't broke. I guess I want to just kind of leave it there. If you like what you got, why do you want to make a big change? I heard somebody say their children can get what they deserve. I think they're doing quite well. Better than when I was in school. Sorry about the voice. If anybody's got anything to say, great. If not, my hip is killing me. Thank you.
Anyone else? So we're going to close the portion of public comment, and we're going to move into item D, board discussion. Does any of the boards, deposit board, have any questions?
The aid ability, we still don't know if any of the money that we spend on this is aidable.
On the feasibility study?
Yeah.
At this time, no, it's not. Is it in process? Yes, but I don't wanna, I wanna be transparent and say I don't know if that's going to happen or not. They're talking about it.
Do we have a hard number on what this will cost each district or?
Get a microphone up there, we can't hear it.
I said, do we have a hard number on what this will actually cost, or if we just have to put it out to bid and see what comes in? Which, I guess.
And just doing some surveys with some other districts, as was presented in the PowerPoint. Let me just find that number. 65 to 105. So that's a shared number. So if it's 65 or comes in at 80, that's a split number. And like Rebecca said, at this point, there's no money for shares. However, we are being told that they're coming up with money. Whether it happens or not, that the budget goes, right? We're gonna give you money and then they don't give it, so. But we can't count on that. So estimates 65 to 105, that's gonna be split, whatever that RFP comes back at. The other option to that is we're gonna put in what we want in that RFP. How many site visits, how many public hearings, how much, we want to put out there is where that cost is gonna come from. Do we want personal visits? Do we want Zoom, websites, all of that? So that's gonna take into consideration the RFP, and we can determine that flow, which will determine, of course, that cost. So when you put out the RFP, of course, you want the best price for what you're putting out there, and that's what we've got to look at. So nothing moves forward till you have the numbers and know what you're looking at.
So ultimately, the discussion taking place here tonight that we would vote on as individual boards is whether or not we're putting this out to RFP, not whether or not we're moving forward with the actual study.
Well, we have to prove the RFP, and that's correct.
So there's still another approval
There's still
process.
another process. There's still another meeting to determine whether you're gonna move forward. Any other questions?
Maybe Mike can answer, the $4.4 million that we're gonna get extra, we can only save so much. It sounds great, but what if you can't spend $4.5 extra million in 1 year? Do you still get it? I know Lori and Denise are smiling, they wanna spend it, but in 2 years, that's $9 million that you gotta spend extra. What if we can't spend that money? Does the state just say, you can't have it now? Because we can't save any money. So that number sounds great, but
It's the same situation that exists for your respective boards right now. If you have excess funds at the end of the school year, then you have to make decisions about what do you do with it.
And to piggyback on next question, that 4.4 million, does the state determine what we can use that for? Does it have to go to specifically? Or can we use it for whatever we feel necessary?
So it's
So the most recent question was around the incentive aid. Are there strings attached? And my understanding is that it's incentive operating aid, similar to the foundation aid that your school district gets now. Which, as Denise said, it can be spent on anything. It's general operating aid.
I was laughing at because, we're operating in a deficit this year, in deposit, and again, it just goes back to certain costs, related to healthcare, related to services for students that are prescribed. And we are able to save money under the reserves, for capital pieces or all the other things that we need, teachers' retirement service. Right, I don't have any extravagant plans, and again, you guys are going to, these people are going to make a decision, but I think to John's point, tonight, you would be deciding if you even want us to put out an RFP, and then you would have a chance, again, at another public board meeting to put through an RFP or not.
Any other questions? Sorry.
So the question was, it's a motion to send out, to allow the districts to send out the RFP. It's not a motion to enter a merger study. That was the question. The question is, are we making a motion to allow the districts to send out requests for proposals?
Is it two layers or one?
I would say, in consideration of a merger. Because that would be within your aid.
Rebecca, could you say that again, please? Thank you.
So what is written here is different than what they're asking. So you're asking, okay, so what I would do if you were to put this into a recommendation, it would be a recommendation to pursue an RFP for consideration of a merger study. And then what will happen is, I would also recommend that the BOCES create the RFP for you. And then if we get the aid, we have that possibility of getting the aid by doing it through a BOCES, then you can get the aid for the RFP and moving forward. And we'll make sure that the pieces the commissioner needs is in there. I also believe it would be in your best interest for you to read through the RFP to make sure that it has in there what you need it to be. And the RFP will also include the opportunity for the board or a committee of the board to interview whoever puts in for the RFP. You don't have to accept any of them at this point. You're not saying that you're going to appoint someone. It's just the possibility, or it's just allowing the RFP to be created and put out so that you can interview possible candidates. So at this second, there's no money involved.
So, deposit board, you've heard the recommendation and for motion. Can I get a motion? John? Dawn? Discussion? All in favor? Aye. No nays? Board of Deposit has approved the motion.
Hancock School Board, can I get a motion to approve the RFP study? Second. All in favor? Aye. So moved. That'll conclude tonight's joint board meeting with Deposit. Thanks, everybody. I get a motion for adjournment. Second.
Deposit board, a motion for adjournment. John? Julie? Discussion? Or Dawn, sorry. All in favor? Aye. We'd like to thank everybody for coming out. Some very good questions, some real things for us to think about, consider moving forward. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.